I am stupid. I am stupid. I am stupid.
Welcome back, everyone, to Figuring Out the Formula podcast. I'm Kyle, joined as always with Chandler and Pat. We are here to talk about the Miami Grand Prix. So it was pretty good Grand Prix. I thought it was a lot better than the Baku Azerbaijan Grand Prix last week. It was our first doubleheader back-to-back races. It wasn't bad. It wasn't as cringy as last year. The racing was pretty good in my opinion. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's just jump right in. So for the practice session of this race weekend, you guys have anything that you want to talk about? Any drama, any crazy stuff? Taylor Swift with another driver, anything like that?
So the biggest thing I think that happened in between our race periods was Adrian Newey actually extended his contract with Red Bull, of which, for those of you that don't know, Adrian Newey is the main designer of the Red Bull car. He used to work for McLaren and Williams, won championships with both of them, and has been a contractor with Red Bull for I don't even know how many years now. But he's essentially the one responsible for Red Bull being a rocket ship, of which, for me being a Red Bull fan, this is great news. Yeah. Our success will probably continue for the foreseeable future, but for everyone else, it's pretty much their worst nightmare.
So Adrian Newey is considered to be the aero god. So aero is a huge part of what Formula One is. It is how the car sticks to the ground. It's how it gets all its downforce, straight line speed. Everything has to do with aero. Well, like Pat said, Adrian Newey, the Red Bull chief technical officer, signed a longer term extension, Christian Horner said. So there's no details on how many years, how much money he's making, that kind of thing. But you can be sure that it's a pretty penny for him to stay at Red Bull.
Absolutely. I mean, if nothing else, the work of Adrian Newey, you look and see from not just this weekend, which we'll get into, but we've talked about it before this season of just how unfair it is with the Red Bull with that DRS. Is just that's the work that Adrian Newey's an expert in, and clearly it's not just him. He has taught his team and the folks that work directly underneath him how to just manufacture a masterpiece. It's just awesome.
An equivalent in football is peak Marshawn Lynch going up against peewee footballers. They don't stand a chance. This dude is way better than everybody else. There's no way for them to catch up.
Yeah. The video of Blooper, the mascot.
Just hitting the little kids with the little stiff arm Heisman. Yeah, that's about it. But I mean, there really wasn't much drama. Like we said, this was the first doubleheader of the season, so there really wasn't much that went on between races. Why don't we just jump right into practice? The first thing that I noticed was that there was no grip at all at the Miami GP.
Yeah, I think that there were reports that they had actually just resurfaced the track again, right before the race, of which it's already tough for Miami because it's a football stadium normally. And so they can't quite do all the regular maintenance that, a track such as Spa or somewhere can do. And then coming with that is the fact that because it's just resurfaced, there's no rubber on the track. And I don't know if they had it this year. If any of our viewers went, definitely let us know how it was. But last year when I went, there really wasn't a lot of preliminary racing like there are at other circuits. And so you don't get all that extra rubber, and then you don't really have any grip. And I think it was Checo that had mentioned it was almost like they were driving on intermediates, where you'll see in a race where there's just one dry line, and if they touch anything else, they're just going to spin out and crash.
So when you say rubber on the track, what do you mean? Obviously the tires wear down. We've talked about in the past, tire compounds, soft, medium, hard. So laying rubber on the track, what does that have to do with the Miami GP?
So when the cars are driving around, they're actually flying tiny little pieces of the tires everywhere. Actually, when I was in Miami last year, we could get so close that there were pieces of tires flying into my drink. And those will fly off the
you
car.
pay extra for that one, Cotton.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Chris told me, hey, come here and watch this. And all of a sudden my drink is just covered in rubber. But because it's so hot in the operating conditions of the tires, it gets actually stuck to the ground. And then as more drivers go over there, it gets stickier and stickier and provides you a better line for more grip versus, a piece of fresh asphalt that's just very smooth rock that can honestly just send you sliding if you just don't take it the right way.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's definitely a little weird because the track is only 2 years old and they already resurfaced it. I know there were some issues between practice, qualifying, and the race where the Miami got rain and it washed away all the rubber. So they basically had a fresh canvas where they had to recreate the lines, the racing lines. So that was definitely a difficulty, but maybe that's what led to Nico Hulkenberg. He crashed in FP1.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just kind of the thing of new grip, and this is Nico because I know Nico sat in with Aston Martin a little bit last year, but I think that stint was already overcome Miami. So this was Nico's first experience seeing Miami, which is not that huge of a deal because this is everybody else's second experience other than the rookies. So, just not knowing the track that well. And again, the unknown of repaving it because, the running joke in F1 with like the old Las Vegas Grand Prix from years ago, which if you want to go down a YouTube rabbit hole or just Google that, and they literally turned the Caesars parking lot into a multiple turn track. This is kind of a parking lot at the Miami Hard Rock Stadium. And so new track. I mean, like if some of the aerial views we saw this weekend were like an exit ramp from the interstate to the parking lot, would just cross right over the track and they paved over that. So, just not having the grip, not having the little bit of experience, we saw this was going to be the first of multiple people, including some very experienced drivers, just losing the rear and spinning out and like having trouble with the grip.
Yeah, the grip was basically what happened. Like we were talking about, like where you're on the racing line. And if you go just a little bit off of the racing line, you lose all grip whatsoever. Whether that hits the marbles, like Pat was talking about, the little rubber pieces, they're called marbles. Whether you hit the marbles or you're just off the racing line, once you're off of it, you're off and you're going towards a wall. Luckily, most of the turns where the drivers were off the racing line and experienced trouble, it was enough runoff room to where they didn't hit the walls. Unfortunately, Nico was not that case. He actually hit the wall, and that was the end of his day. That was only FP1, so they had plenty of time to repair the car, that kind of thing.
Didn't have to worry about a sprint either.
Yeah. We talk about, you were talking about earlier with the rookies and kind of how this is their first go at the Miami GP. Well, last week we talked about the rookies having mentorships, that kind of thing. Like Oscar has Lando, Logan Sargent has Alex Albon. Well, we also discussed how Nick DeVries has Yuki Tsunoda as a mentor. Well, Yuki is a fireball. He is 3'2". He's twinning with Yoda. Like the dude is tiny little rabbit. He's the nicest guy ever until he puts on his helmet. Well, during the broadcast of the practice sessions, Jenson Button, a former world champion in F1, he described Yuki Tsunoda as a terrier. So a terrier, like our good friend Drew Ferguson, is very tiny, very riled up, ready to go, angry if something doesn't work out their way. That is exactly what Yuki is. And I think Jensen personified that perfectly.
I think it's a great analogy. Just perfect. That's like, I never would have thought of it, but then as soon as he said it, it makes sense.
Bro, anytime Yuki's name pops up on the coverage, like you see their name pop up on the lower right-hand corner of their radio, I just know it's going to be a bunch of stars with beep, beep. You just know it's going to happen.
As soon as it comes, like I just brace everybody. I tell everybody to stop what they're doing, stop talking. Like we have to hear this.
Yeah,
of which I do actually. I need to start listening to the actual like team radios throughout the race. They're uncensored.
Yeah, you have to push your Sky Red button 20
yeah.
times and pay $400 per race.
And I
There
mean,
used to
with
be a
Yuki,
YouTube channel that would actually post it afterwards. I don't know. I haven't looked up. I don't think they've posted at all this year. I don't know if Liberty and the Formula One management have like copyrighted all of it, but you could go back and listen. I'm sure on the F1 app you could listen, but man, there's some golden Yuki Tsunoda clips.
Gotta be. I know NASCAR does radioactive, where they have filtered and unfiltered radio contact throughout the actual cup race. It'd be cool if F1 got back into that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here for it. I love hearing the drivers like curse or like talk smack about each other in the middle of a race.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see if AlphaTauri just keeps putting up with that. I know they had a lot of issues with that in his first year, where he was basically just telling his team to shut up and let him do the driving, even though he wasn't really driving that well. But I'm all here for it. I definitely want to hear some more chirps from drivers on the air if we can get them. I don't know if it's just hard for them to pick them up during their broadcast or not, though.
Well, it's hard to not just pick them up, but it's hard to filter what they're saying because
That's
it
true.
is a international broadcast. Some countries are a lot less lenient on the things that some of these drivers say. So I understand why they don't promote it, but that's what social media is for. Social media is a back channel of what people want to hear, but you can't really post live time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just keep feeding me your weekly Fernando Alonso, like pleasant drive in the countryside radio messages.
Speaking of that, I think that there was one driver who we wanted to hear the radio, but it's probably a good thing that we didn't. It was Charles Leclerc in FP2. Old son just wrecked. I mean, same thing like we were talking earlier. He just got off the racing line and it was gone.
Yep.
Yeah, of which Charles's radio is always great. He finds kind of the worst and best ways to put himself down. I remember a couple of years ago in Baku when he hit straight into the wall in Baku, he just goes, I am stupid. I am stupid. I am stupid. And then on the other hand, you have like France last year where he crashed and screamed no as loud as he possibly could. And I'll talk about it more like when we get to qualifying. But at this point, it kind of feels like he's honestly going a little bit insane, trying to push himself so hard to keep up. And
he is, but I think if we're talking about the radio, I think both him and Carlos Sainz's radio, normally their radio transmissions when they play it on TV sounds a little something like this. Like I don't know if they're speaking Italian or if they're. I need subtitles.
Or if they're just speaking. They're speaking in radio waves.
Live example.
Ferrari has something wrong with their radio system. I don't know if they understand that or not, but I need subtitles anytime that shit pops up on the right-hand side because any other radio I can understand on the broadcast, and then Charles or Carlos comes on and it's like
they're just speaking in spaghetti. We can't understand it.
Yeah, they're speaking in the gabagoo.
Yeah,
I don't know. So that was pretty much it for the practice session. I think as we move into the qualifying session, I would actually like to hear from Patrick to see what's going on in Pat's paddock this week.
What we're going to talk about is Liberty Media. So Liberty Media, for those of you that don't know, is the company that actually owns Formula One. They actually also own the Atlanta Braves for all of our baseball fans out there. Now they own Formula One, and then the FIA is actually responsible for just the racing part. Liberty Media handles everything else. Now, the way they handle this is through a sub company that they have called Formula One Management. Formula One Management, they're responsible for everything from like the broadcast to, what bartenders and security is used to the actual construction of the track for the weekend. Anything like that. Now, I do know there were some issues last year when I went from like bartenders and things like that not getting paid because for Miami, actually, Hard Rock Entertainment actually runs all of the stuff that Formula One management does for any kind of trackside activities and things like that. So if you have anyone out there that went, definitely let us know how your experience was this year. Definitely want to hear if it improved or not. Now, this year, and we'll get towards more of this in the race section. They decided to have a couple different things, like a new driver intro. We had some pretty good grid walks and good interviews there. But they're essentially responsible for all that stuff that is not a part of the racing. All of the spectacle of Formula One, that's everything done by Liberty Media.
The hype.
Yes,
Liberty
all the
Media
hype.
Liberty Media is the hype man telling you to take a tequila shot and hop up on the table with that bad bitch.
Right. And
That's Liberty Media.
Stefano Domenicali, the CEO, essentially the showrunner of Formula One, he said in the past that he wants F1 to be like the Super Bowl every weekend. And I think that they're using Miami, and they're also going to use Las Vegas as kind of the proving grounds for that. And then eventually try to take, all this glitz and spectacle and things like that to the other races. Of which, as I said, we'll talk about it more later, but it's really just interesting to see the difference between like a race in America versus a race anywhere else.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about, the radio contact and how some countries you can have cussing, or you can have, PG-13 cussing with a bleep, like, George Russell's, sugar, you can have that. Some countries you can't have anything but yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I understand Liberty Media is kind of different. They're behind the scenes. Like you hear about the FIA and all that all the time about what they do, what they don't do, the stewards versus the marshals or the race directors, that kind of thing. It's kind of confusing. I'm glad that you explained that this week on what they actually do. We move in towards the qualifying section, and the FIA became very important in qualifying this week. So we'll talk about the final running order of Q1, who is out in Q1, but I want to start with there were two impedings and an unsafe release. The impedings are when a car is on a flying lap doing an actual qualifying timed lap, and a car gets in front of them who's not on a flying lap. So they're warming their tires, they're cooling down, whatever it might be, but they get in the way of the car that's actually doing a timed lap. So there were two instances of that. That is unacceptable.
Yes.
It's a gentleman's sport, just like golf. It's a gentleman's sport where if you see someone on a flying lap, you get the fuck out of the way so they can get their time.
And from a safety aspect, a street course is even more imperative because you don't have, unless now Miami has a couple of really long straightaways for a street course, just like Baku did, but it's very tight. And one of the things that if you're coming around a corner and if you're trying to warm the tires, or if you're on an in lap or whatever, and you are taking up the middle and somebody comes around the corner on a flying lap, and boom, right there. I mean, that's putting yourself in danger. That's putting the driver that's behind you in danger. So the imperative, it is of utmost importance to make sure that you're on the opposite side of the track from the racing line whenever you're heating that up. And we saw this twice and really no repercussions of it.
My thing is the drivers know when other drivers are on a flying lap and when they're not.
Exactly.
There's Pat in episode 2 or 3 discussed the flags. A blue flag comes out when there's a driver who's actually on a flying lap, to let the drivers know, hey, get the fuck out of the way. Someone's coming at full speed. 2 instances in one qualifying round is unacceptable. What's even more unacceptable is that the FIA, they noted the investigation, they noted the instances, but they did not punish the drivers. Nothing happened from that.
to me, this gets annoying because there's a very simple way to, or I guess it's not quite as simple as I would think it would be, but this all starts with the FIA. The teams and the drivers, they all know where everyone is on track. That's their responsibility. Your race engineer is telling you who's coming behind, who's in front of you. At the end of the pit lane, there's literally colored lights that tell you if someone's coming around as you're exiting the pit lane. And, this is just a collective fuck up that we've actually seen a ton of times in the past. And to where a lot of times some drivers don't even get to set a lap because there's so many other cars just sitting in front of them.
Mhm.
And I don't quite know the best way to penalize drivers for it. If, it's maybe adding a couple tenths to their lap time or something like that.
Bro, it's easy. If you were to impede in the race, if you were to impede a car that's on the lead lap and you're getting lapped, you get in front of them, you have the blue flag, you're shown the blue flag and nothing happens, you get in the way and then they lose a spot or they lose time or whatever it might be. I'm pretty sure it's a 5-second time penalty.
If not a black and orange flag or black flag. I mean, we've seen black flag one for this.
Yeah, so either your race is over or you get a 5-second time penalty. Well, in qualifying, it's even easier to see because it's basically one-on-one. So if you're a slow car, not on a flying lap, and you get in the way of a car on a flying lap, the FIA can see that just as we, the viewers, can see it, that you got in the way. That should be a 5-second time penalty. Easy. Whether that means your overall qualifying time or you have a five place grid penalty, it doesn't matter.
Something.
It's super simple to see. Now, I haven't dug into the rules, the FIA rules on what the actual penalty is, but my opinion is you have 2 instances in one qualifying session, like one Q1 session.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable.
Go ahead. Keep going.
What's even more unacceptable than the impeding penalties was the unsafe release. So there was an unsafe release where basically in the paddock, not Pat's paddock, just the regular paddock, a car pulls out in front of another car. Granted, the car that pulls out, whenever a car pulls out of the garage, it has its lead mechanic, check and look, and then they clear them out and then they go. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get into gear, that kind of thing. But in Q1, there was an unsafe release where a car got in front, cut off another car, and had to slam on its brakes, take avoiding action. That is so dangerous.
And my thought is with this, like, so we've seen unsafe releases during the race. To me, like having an unsafe release in qualifying is 10 times more unacceptable than during the race. Like in the race, like, sure, you're coming out of a pit stop trying to catch, and the car's coming in for the pits. Fine, it happens. We're trying to get first out of the pit. But as you mentioned, Kyle, we have the lead mechanic standing like 2 feet from the actual pit lane and looking, and then saying, "Okay, come on." The 80 kilometers an hour is what, 40 miles an hour? Like.
I don't know.
Close enough.
Yeah, I don't fucking know. I'm American. What the fuck?
Americans that are I'm ballparking here.
I know 3 grams and 10 millimeter. That's about it. Sorry, buddy.
I know that 45 kilograms is 100 pounds, but you like just say 40 to 45 miles an hour. I mean, that's a car coming down the highway, which is fast, but as long as the pit lane's not someone coming right around a corner. That is, you're standing there looking all the way down and you can see it, and the lead mechanic will still say, "Come on out." And I get that there's 1 or 2 seconds of, maybe is this getting to gear? That kind of goes back on the garage of saying, okay, let's account for this and not wait until, which I understand that the drivers are going to want to wait till like the very last minute to get their flying lap in to try and set that last minute time to move on through. But this is Q1 here, where you might have like especially the top teams are going to go set their first lap and know, hey, we gave it 80%. That's good enough to get us in the top 15. There's absolutely no reason for this to happen. And I wouldn't even be as mad about it if the FIA had penalized the situation, but it just went unregarded. It's like, was the FIA even watching qualifying?
Yeah,
I think
I agree. So one of the podcasts that I subscribe to is the Pit Stop podcast. Um, really good guys. It's a great podcast. Go follow them. But they had Mikey Brown, so Fernando Alonso's number one mechanic, and he talked about on their pod basically how long it takes for, because he's the guy that goes out by the pit lane, looks to the left, looks to the right, and then clears Fernando to go and take off, whether that's qualifying or whatever practice. And he was saying like sometimes it takes a little bit for Fernando to get into gear and to go, or whenever he sees him clear him to actually get the tires going, that kind of thing. So I get there's a little bit of a lag, but for there's no excuse for them to have a lag and to have an unsafe release and to not get a penalty. It doesn't matter if it's willful or unwillful, you still had an unsafe release. So for the FIA to have two impeding penalties and an unsafe release is insane.
Yeah, and that's I guess what I was getting at was that lag is only 2 to 3 seconds at the most.
Yeah.
That's not going to make a difference in terms of if you cross the checkered line to start your flying lap with 1 second or 0 seconds, you're still cutting it too close at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. So, but that happened in Q1. And in Q1, we had Logan Sargent out, home Grand Prix, grew up, an ass hair. He grew up an ass hair away from the Miami GP. So Logan Sargent was out. Piastri, Stroll, Yuki, and Lando Norris was out in Q1. We talk about the impeding and the unsafe release in Q1. Well, what happens in Q2? The exact same fucking thing. A Haas, unsafe release, same thing, not called by the FIA. What the fuck are these guys even doing? There's no point. I mean, you might as well have Michael Massey over there jerking each other off. They don't even do anything.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're just sitting on their thumbs. Like in the past, for those of you that are really new to Formula One, we had a lot of issues with like track limits not being called, where they would say at X corner, yeah, track limits aren't being enforced, and then at Y corner they're being enforced, and so you'd have every driver go wide, and then randomly someone would get penalized for it, and then they eventually finally cracked down and said the white line is the white line, and you will get a penalty for it. Of which they just need the same thing here. And Formula One teams, they're not going to change the way that they do things until they face a penalty for it. It's like we're going to keep seeing unsafe releases and things like that all the time. We don't get a ton of them every week, but when they do, it's like this can really ruin another team's day.
You're 100% correct. I mean, when you have an unsafe release, that means there's a car that's already in the way and it pulls out right, and another car pulls out right in front of it, which could lead to accidents. It could lead to money being spent on a wing, gearbox, whatever it might be. That could be very costly. I think it's unfortunate that it happens, but I think it's more unfortunate that the FIA doesn't actually regulate its responses to it, because let's say the Haas the Haas did pull out in front of another car. What if it hits that car? That car can't stop. Who pays for that? Okay, well, no one's going to actually pay for that besides the team that has the wrecked car. But the team that hit that car should definitely get punished, whether that's a second penalty, whatever it might be. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think that actually that's actually a pretty good idea if they were to start making teams pay each other for something like that. Because if you crash into someone normally, it's not like, oh, Ferrari crashes into Mercedes and then Ferrari pays them $1 million. It's just sorry, pal, I ruined both our days. Like,
yeah, tough shit. I'd signed Carlos Sainz. You know what I mean? Like El Torpedo. Sorry. I definitely agree with that. That was Q2. At the very beginning of Q2, Haas had an unsafe release. Nothing else happened during that session. Out in Q2, we had De Vries, Joe Granu. We had Hamilton, crazy, first time ever in the United States where he qualified below the top 6. Then we had Nico Hulkenberg and then Alex Albon.
And I will give some props after last week. I made the comment that Nick DeVries' stay in F1 might be short lived. He makes it out of Q1. I mean, I give the guy props.
Barely.
Hey, you know what? He was into Q2. So I'll give the guy props. I will recognize game. He beat both of my McLarens. And so, I have a statement on McLaren later in the end of the show. But
Chan, you remember that statement about DeVries making it in a Q2 and how you're impressed with him and how you take back your comments. Just hold on to that till we get to the race, okay? So moving into Q3, we have crazy. Nothing happened except for one thing towards the very ass end of Q3. So you had Checo. He was making a killer lap. Set a killer lap. It was provisional pole, but Max was behind him. He was hauling ass. And then suddenly he got loose in one of the turns, I forget which turn, and he had to pull out of the qualifying. So he kept going, just not full pace, and then ended up qualifying P9. So you had Checo on provisional, Max at P9, and you're like, all right, that's fine. Max will just do another lap. Well, at 1 minute and 36 seconds left in the Q3 session, Charles Leclerc decided to he decided to just crash. He's like, yeah, fuck it, whatever, fuck Max.
Not learn from practice.
Yeah. So Charles Leclerc crashes, and it led to a red flag of this session. Like I said, this was with 1 minute and 36 seconds left in the session. Q3, like we said before, last session ever before the actual race weekend. So this is to set the rest of the field. It absolutely ruined Max's qualifying effort. Max was set to take the pole, but he had that bad lap. And then from there, it was over.
Yep. And I think we talked about it before on an episode, but when it comes to qualifying or practices, the rule is, red flag stops the session wherever it is. The rule in qualifying, I think practices as well, is that if the red flag occurs in the last 2 minutes of the session, then it's over with. Now, we've seen some pretty historical moments of this. The number one place that pops up to me is Monaco, where we've seen it before. But because there's less than 2 minutes, Chuck's crash stops everything right there with a red flag. And because it's under 2 minutes, the session will not resume. Everybody had been placed. And, Max even alluded to this in his post conference, was that when he didn't get that first lap, it's kind of like, oh no, if a safety car comes out late, we're screwed. Or the safety car a red flag comes out late, we are screwed. So that's really kind of the mindset with qualifying. Q3 being 12 minutes is get out early, get a good enough lap where if something happened and you couldn't go again, you'd be satisfied with what you got. And of course, Max had to abort, so he had a time. I don't know why, for some reason. So Valtteri Bottas and Max technically, Valtteri's on the F1 app said did not start, and then Max's said did not finish. So Max had a time, but it was because he backed out. It's probably we're seeing minute 30s, minute 29s. His was like 2 minutes because he had
with Max's time, he was starting his second flying lap. That's what it was.
That's probably why Valtteri just never recorded a time like that was.
Well, Valtteri waited till about 4 minutes to go out to do qualifying. So he went out about 4 minutes. Let's say 3.5 minutes. He was done with his, we'll say closer to 3 minutes left in the session. Valtteri finished his out lap and then ready to start his flying lap. He had started it, but then there was traffic or something. So he pulled out. He was going to do one more out lap, basically ready to go, ready for my flying lap. And then that's when Chuck crashed. And then he's like, all right, well, P10 is fucking damn good for Alfa Romeo. So
Hey, he kind of showed out. I mean, I don't know how high he would have gotten if he'd have set a time, maybe eighth. I mean,
qualifying was pretty crazy. I know in Q1 the times from P20 to like P7, P8 were separated, within the tenths of a second.
Mhm.
So it was very competitive. The track was very good at that point in time. It was very close. It was anyone's game to win or lose based off their lap. They ran a really good lap. They were making it to Q3. If they ran a decent lap, they were done. That's basically what happened. For Q3, the starting order for the top 10 was Perez, Alonso, Sainz, Magnussen, Gasly, Russell, Leclerc, Ocon, Verstappen, and Bottas. So the key people in this was Verstappen starting 9th, and then you had Checo on the pole, my man Alonso in 2nd, and Carlos Sainz in 3rd. So I knew as soon as this qualifying happened that Fernando, it was his podium to lose. So I decided on Sunday before the race to sport this classic tee, brought to you by Etsy.
Stand up for the crowd. All we could see is the 14 in the helmet.
All right, here you go, ladies and gents.
Yeah, that's clean.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, so I keep that thing on me. McLaren makes me want to cry and punch a baby in the face. So I'm just gonna hang out with the 2-time world champion.
That's fine. I have my prepared statement for the end of the show.
Some people call it bandwagoning. Some people call it swifting. Yeah, swifting, whatever. I don't care. It is what it is. Fernando, we'll talk about it in a minute. Bro, he's so fun to just cheer on. He's a great guy and a hell of a racer. Let's move right into race weekend. This has nothing to do with Alonso, but it does have something to do with Chandler's rookie crush, who he said a lot of shit about last week. So did I. But earlier in this episode, he said that he's improved and he's been really good. Great guy. Yuki's best friend, Nick DeVries. Well, I'm a huge Lando fan. For those of you who don't know,
me too. I'm Lando. I'm a McLaren guy.
Lando was the guy I chose when I watched Drive to Survive for the first time. Like, this guy's awesome. I started watching his streams on Twitch. Great guy, funny. This is my driver. Well, Nick DeVries' bitch ass decided to fucking rear end Lando Norris.
After Lando had a hellacious start. Looking at the overhead of like when I started, like you didn't see it obviously with the lights out from the front. The overhead angle when they showed about 5 to 10 laps in, Lando was on a tear down the front straight.
Bro, you would have thought Lando was Dom Toretto in the Miami Grand Prix. This motherfucker just shot in front of everybody. Passed Nick DeVries on the opening lap, gets into the first, second turn. Boom. Nick DeVries is like, brakes? Never heard of them. Sorry, I'm just going to use your car, as if we have fenders and not expensive ass wings. Nick DeVries rear ends Lando Norris, pushing him wide. Lando loses a shit ton of fucking places. And Nick DeVries is still a short little bitch looking elf motherfucker. Other than that, that's about it.
DeVries does look like just an uppity, like spoiled, like Richie Rich. Is that the old cartoon kid? Like just
it is. But if I had to compare Nick DeVries to anybody, it would be a South Pole elf. Not a North Pole, not the good elf, a South Pole elf who never gets any love. But that's just because he rear-ended Lando Norris. The thing that pissed me off, we were talking about the FIA earlier. The FIA didn't investigate that shit at all. They didn't even say it was a race incident. They just said no.
But it took them like 8 laps to note it.
They noted it 8 laps later, and then they didn't even say no investigation required. They just didn't do anything with it. It's like, what the fuck is the point of this?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that, obviously if there's someone out there that knows the rules really well, definitely correct me on this.
You're saying we don't?
The guidelines for like first lap incidents are not consistent at all. If there's like a huge crash or something, they're just like, okay, whatever. And then sometimes you'll have someone get hit and they're like, okay, 5-second penalty for you. And then for instance, like this, like, nah, sorry, pal. Like, take a fucking hike. Like, see you next week. And it's the same thing we were talking about with the unsafe releases. Like, they just need to crack down on this stuff because, it's hard when cars are bunched up and everything. But when you just straight up run into the back of someone, like, that's a whole different story. If, you're getting pushed wide because there's 4 cars on the track where you're at. And I think there definitely should have been a penalty there of, some way, shape, or form.
100%. He ruined his race. He pushed him back. I mean,
right.
He pushed him back. He probably lost 5 spots at least.
Yeah. I mean, at the end, from start of the race to the end of the race, Lando finished 17th. So he started in 16th, but so from start to finish is only -1, but he had made his way up to like 13.
Yeah.
That first long stretch. And that's not even, from the start to that is not a long stretch in turn 1 to turn 1 from this track. Like made some tremendous progress.
No,
what really sucks is that for McLaren, it's if they don't ruin their own race at the beginning, someone else is going to do it for them at this rate.
Yeah.
And who even knows if they're going to finish like half the races of the season in the top 10 just because either their car's dying or someone's crashing into them every single week.
Well, that was the thing later on in the race. Oscar Piastri, the other driver for McLaren, he was having issues with his car. They said it was a software issue, not mechanical, but his brake was long, which means it feels like your brake is fading. It's harder to brake at full power, which...
You mean to tell me that with sponsorships and digital screens on the car from both Google and Amazon Web Services that we have a software issue? This is just another reason that I'm just fed up, and I'll save my comments from McLaren until the end of the show.
Red Bull is still taking applicants for fandom.
Yeah, it definitely is. But so that was Nick DeVries. He rear-ended Lando Norris at the beginning of the race. Nothing really happened until the strategy aspect of the race came in. So we talked a couple episodes ago about the strategy of the races with the tires. You could run a medium for about 20 laps and then you could go hard for the rest of the race, or you could start with a hard tire and then move to a medium for the last part of the race. Well, that came into a big part of what actually happened during the race. During the transition of that strategy, Carlos Sainz decided to pit and he was changing his tires. Well, what happened was old dude skirted right the fuck into the pit lane. I mean, he was hauling ass. I didn't know he was pitting at first. I thought he just locked up his brakes and was going straight into a wall. I was like, holy fuck, dude. And then I figured out, like, they actually zoomed in the camera on him. He was pitting to change his tires. Old son locked up his brakes and he was hauling dick in the pit lane at the entrance. He pits, has an extremely fast stop, gets out of there. I think it was like
2.21. I just looked it up. It is the third fastest pit stop of the year. And Ferrari, and kudos to Ferrari sidebar, is that they still have the fastest pit stop with 2.1 in Saudi Arabia. Red Bull has a 2.11, I think, also in Saudi Arabia. And then Ferrari has the 3, 4, and 5th quickest pit stops. Ferrari pit crew has just amazing this year. So they did their part. Now, Carlos helped them by getting into the pit a little extra quick, but
yeah, that brings me to my point. So, like Chandler said, Carlos Sainz had a 2.21 second pit stop. Fucking incredible. Great work. But then he also sped getting into his pit lane. So the speeding penalty is 5 second penalty while in the race. So if he doesn't stop again, it's just 5 seconds added on to your final time. If you're in third place with a 2-second lead over fourth place, you're going to fall behind fourth place because you have a 5-second time penalty. So that actually ended up happening. The FIA did something for once. They gave a penalty. Michael Massey's wiener got hard because of it. I don't know, but it was definitely something to talk about because you don't really see a lot of speeding penalties in F1.
Mm-mm. And some you don't see a whole lot. Well, we saw. Really, I don't think we've seen a speeding penalty yet. I'm trying to think if one of Esteban's 12 penalties in Bahrain was a speeding one, but I don't think they were. So we haven't seen one yet this year. It's usually we're good for seeing about 3 to 4 a season. I mean,
yeah, well, that was one of them. But we talk about the tire strategy, like I said, with the mediums to hard and then hard compound to soft or hard to medium, whatever it might have been for this race weekend. Checo was by himself the majority of the race. He started on a medium compound, and then he went to a hard compound. Checo is the king of the streets, like we've talked about before, but then he's also very, very good about saving his tires. Max Verstappen started in 9th place, and Pat, bring us through his journey throughout this Miami GP.
So Max started out in 9th, and his original objective for the start, because he's in the middle of everybody, is just get away cleanly. Like, don't get hit by anybody. Don't let someone pull a Nick DeVries on you. Just get through the first lap cleanly and let the cars get a little bit of separation so he can start picking him off. Well, he starts out basically just cutting through everybody like it's a knife, like a hot knife through butter. I think he got both Kevin Magnussen and Charles Leclerc in one turn going down the main straight. And
although
then
he did fall back to 10th. I mean, but the start was clean.
Yeah, and then eventually, I think it was, I want to say lap 15, he was already in second place or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he was joking about it with Fernando Alonso, saying, "Oh, you were so nice to me last time, saying lap 25." And he pretty much just cut through everybody. One, just showing his racecraft. Two, the Red Bull is a rocket ship if anybody hasn't figured it out by now. And three, he happened to have the right strategy. I think a lot of the teams didn't quite know which was the best tire going into this weekend. You know, they run a bajillion simulations and everything like that, but at the end of the day, almost all that data can get thrown out of the window just from, happenstance. And this week, he started out on the hard. Checo starts out on the medium. Now, Max had started out on the hard tire, whereas Checo started on the medium. Now, Max ends up pitting on, I think, lap 46.
Yeah.
And actually within 2 laps, he had already passed Checo, who had to pit earlier to switch from the medium to the hard tire. After that, it was pretty much a done deal. It turned out that for once, the hard tire was actually the fastest tire somehow. And, for Max, it was great showing his racecraft off, but it also kind of was just a pretty good roll of the dice. Checo, I don't think there was honestly anything he was going to be able to do. He couldn't have started on the hards because pretty much everyone else around him started on the medium, and they would have immediately overtaken him, and then it was pretty much done from there for him. But it was a big roll of the dice, I think. I know Max had said that he and his team had, tried to consider all the variables and just kind of decided they were going to go for just a long, clean stint, just try not to get too far ahead of themselves. And it ended up working out.
I blame all of this on Pirelli. Again, here's my weekly Pirelli rant. Last week I made the comment that Esteban Ocon and Nico Hülkenberg could have run those hard tires all the way through Miami. And
which they could have.
From those that listen frequently to this show, I do not use profanity that much, but this is the magnitude of this is that Pirelli has been dog shit this year. And in terms of the fact that it's just, we cannot have 3 compounds that are, we have the total of 5 compounds, but they pick the 3 that are right next to each other. We can't have tires that the softs last 10 laps, the mediums last 30 laps, and the hards will last 50. This is just living in the great state of South Carolina. We have 2 tire manufacturers who would love to get their name in the hat and probably could put a better racing tire on the car than Pirelli is right now.
Who? What are those 2 manufacturers?
Michelin and Continental. And that's saying something for Continental tires.
Get the fuck out of here, you
That's
hick.
how strong
Man,
You South Carolina
Michelin
hick.
can
Ain't that?
stick. Michelin
Yeah.
can stick to giving stars to restaurants.
Yeah, I'll
That's
take
how
it.
strongly I feel about Pirelli. And that might just be me. Like, I may be taking this to an extreme, but we do have to acknowledge that over the last 2 years, the parity in the types of tire compounds has grown. And I think it's doing a lot because, like Pat said, Checo, there's no choice for him to start on the hards. Like, even if we knew that the hards were the tire to be, you're out in front and people are going to want to get a jump on you. You've got to get the softer tires to get that lead from the jump. So, like, he has no choice in that. And Red Bull has no choice. Even say the roles were reversed and you have Max who's in first, and like, obviously Max is driving a little faster. But if Max is in first and he's still a championship leader, they're probably not putting him on hards at first. And if Checo's in ninth.
No shot. But it also, you get down to the weight. So F1, you don't refuel the car.
Mhm.
And I think they said, 3 fucking, I don't know. We were talking about the metric system. 3 something grams leads to 0.3 of a second of a lap. And basically, the wear of the medium tire that Checo suffered was greater than the medium tire that Max suffered later on in the lap, because Max had a lot less weight in the car because he had a lot less fuel.
It makes sense.
So it makes sense, but at the same time, I agree with Chandler, what he's saying. The whole aspect of this week was the C2 through the C4. So you had the C2 was the soft, C3 was the medium, C4 was the hard.
The C3 is the true medium of the scale. Like, it's the right there in the middle point.
Whoever decides which compounds to use is a fucking schmuck. I mean, this guy is probably like pointing at which one he wants to choose, because it doesn't really fucking matter. Every week it's the same damn thing. It literally makes no difference at all.
To play devil's advocate, it is pretty hard in Pirelli's defense to make a tire that lasts an exact window of time. Now, the problem with what they've done is that we had talked last week about how in 2021 there were all kinds of tires exploding because they couldn't handle how long they were supposed to. And I think Pirelli has corrected that, but now they've gone too far with it and just need to dial it back, which I don't know how they haven't picked up on this yet. Because like you said, Kyle, it's almost like they use the same compounds every single week. And we also never see where, they switch the same compounds year to year for the same track, and you don't get any kind of variance almost ever.
No.
And in this case, it didn't really benefit any of the race fans, just because people were like, I'll just cruise on hards for the rest of my life.
That was the big difference with this race. I think once you hit that lap 25, lap 30 mark, there was a huge we're going to cruise. We're going to ride this out. Whether you were on medium or hard, like, you were pretty much on hard at lap 30. Whether you were fresh on a hard tire or you were just extending the life of your hard tire, you were on a hard tire around lap 30. You were just cruising. You were hoping that it was going to work out. That was it. Whether that was the case or not, that happened. You move into, like you said, lap 46, Max Verstappen pits on lap 46. Lap 48, he passes Checo for the win. He keeps going. It's just a parade of drivers. Nothing's really happening. There's only about 9 laps left in the Grand Prix. It is what it is. We thought there was going to be like a 5-lap battle between Checo and Max. Checo's tires were fucking gassed at that point. There was no more grip left on them. He was just riding them out as much as he could. The only thing that happened later in that race was Fernando Alonso. I saw a meme earlier today where it was people like figuring out how to go to a Formula One race and all this stuff. One aspect was become a F1 driver for free to watch a big screen TV of the track. Fernando Alonso in turn 1 saw a trackside television screen of his teammate Lance Stroll at turn 11 passing someone, and he radioed into Aston Martin and said, "Tell Lance I said great pass."
Then asks, "That was a great pass in a turn 1. What place is he in?" And they came back P13.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fucking great pass, and Fernando Alonso's just over here. He's over here just watching him pass. It's like, holy fuck, dude, you're going 200 miles an hour, just looking at a TV as you pass by, seeing your teammate pass someone. Like, what a fucking animal. And that's why Taylor Swift loves him, bro. I mean,
are you getting to Mr. Consistent now?
Bro, Chandler calls him Mr. Consistent because Fernando Alonso, after this race, he scored 15 points, exactly 15 points in every single race of the season.
Race weekend.
Because
that was the thing
because that shitty sprint weekend last weekend.
We were like, what's going to happen with him getting with him not finishing like
on the podium,
on the podium in Azerbaijan? But guess what? He made up for it with the sprint race. So we are at an even 75 through 5 races. That is.
Yep, exactly. So, like I said, Fernando is running his race. He's just cruising all by himself in third place, and he sees his teammate, Lance Stroll, turn 11, making passes, saying, "Great pass, everybody. I love it." What a teammate, bro. I mean, 2-time world champion, class act. You gotta love the guy.
And my take on it is that obviously he probably would not be not dozing off, but just casually glancing at this if he knew that he could catch second or if he knew that Ford was in danger. And then on top of that, what I think makes him feel so comfortable and relaxed behind it is there was a comment that came out after Saudi Arabia, so after 2 races this year, that Fernando Alonso basically said that whenever he signed with Aston Martin, the plans and like the objectives that they laid out when he signed his contract, like they're achieving 2024's mark in 2023. So they're already well ahead of the schedule. And I think that he's really content with, if he could put up 15 points a week, that means he's finishing third basically every week. To give you the constructor standpoint. So it's actually right now a tight race. You have Aston Martin's in second with 102 points. Mercedes is in third with 96 points. So it's a tight race in third right now. But I feel like that if Lance picks up the pace a little bit like he had early on in the season, he needs to go break a couple of wrists again. But I mean, that'll be a dogfight to the end. That'll be what we're watching coming into the season as Mercedes versus Aston Martin.
Because second place and third place in the Constructors Championship is millions of dollars towards future cars, future plans towards the organization. I think it's very beneficial, especially as we move into the next Grand Prix. The next Grand Prix is the Qatar Airways Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Whenever you say it, you have to do this. I don't know why. It's just the FIA rules. Pat, let me see your best. What the maybe it's the camera angle. I don't know.
It's the camera angle.
Give it again.
It's the camera angle. It's the camera angle.
I do. All right. So Pat, Pat's going to work on that a little bit. But while Pat works on that, Chandler, I just want to brag. You guys doubted me. Last weekend, you guys said, Checo is the king of the streets. He's going to win. Both Chandler and Pat said that Checo was going to win the Miami Grand Prix. Well, I wanted him to win, but I'm happy to announce that both these guys can suck my dick because Max Verstappen, my pick, he won the Grand Prix. So I'm going to pick first for
Can't lie, they made you sweat Saturday night, right?
Not really. You know, if Max ain't coming from behind, he ain't coming. You know what I mean? But for the Qatar Airways Amelia Romagna Grand Prix, we have qualifying Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, race weekend. The actual race is 9 a.m. Eastern time. I am going to pick yet again Max Verstappen. The Red Bulls can't be stopped. That's it. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Max Verstappen, baby. Chandler, who's your pick for this next race?
See, I really wish you'd come to me third because
Tough shit, loser.
I feel like I have to pick Max. I had a pick in the chamber ready to go if I was picking third, and like it had Pat pick Max, I would have gone.
I'm picking Max.
You're do what?
I'm picking Max.
You're picking Max.
There's no reason not to.
Look,
all right.
I'll pour one out, and we won't have the Max curse. Like, I mean, y'all can. I'll take one for the team.
Nope, you said it. Ladies and gentlemen, all three of us picked Max Verstappen to win the Qatar Airways Amelia Romagna Grand Prix. Pat won last time before we sign out. Let me see it. Hopefully it's improved.
Well, you want my Italianness?
Well, it has not improved, ladies and gentlemen.
It will not improve.
Can I read my statement on my fanhood with McLaren?
Please do.
Okay, so I just want to go.
Wait. Do I need to get the world's smallest violin ready for this?
No.
Okay.
We get a kick out of this. So this has a little bit of an inside joke. So if you followed Formula One from last year, you will
just say the fucking
read it.
I understand that without my agreement, that McLaren F1 have put out a press release late this afternoon that I will be a fan for them next year. This is wrong, and I have not decided on a contract with a fanhood with McLaren for 2023. I will not be driving our fanhood for McLaren next year. So I am on a free agency basis at this point. McLaren, I'm kind of like a restricted free agent. McLaren could just make it into Q3. Then I will next week at Imola Romagna.
Where? All right.
If they make it into Q3, I will be a McLaren fan that week. If they do not make it into Q3, then I am a free agent. And by the end of the season, I will probably have a new team, but I am sick and tired of being sick and tired when it comes to McLaren.
Well, good news for our subscribers. Chandler has yet to buy any F1 gear. So
other than the McLaren gear I have. So
he was given that for free. But anyways, let's move into the Qatar Airways Amelia Romagna Grand Prix. Pat, one last time before we sign off, please.
No. We'll work on it.
All right. Pat's going to work on his Italian movements. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Figuring Out the Formula. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to the next podcast.